Okay. Bezrat Hashem. So, anybody who hasn't heard the first year should probably listen to the first year before this. So we're just going to begin by...
More than once. Right.
We're going to start by continuing to discuss a little bit of what we discussed last week. Getting to know yourself. There was an important point that I forgot to mention, so I'm going to mention it now. Many times, people do understand themselves well enough to know that there are certain areas in their life that they have to work on. That is already a stage. When a person knows, I have a difficulty in a certain area. Let's say, with one guy, his difficulty was getting up for Shacharis. He decided for himself, and everybody has to decide for themselves, what is the thing that I need to do? It happened to be that this is what this guy felt. He had a whole list of things. That's the truth. It was very, he was very on top of it. He had a whole list of things to do. And this was one of them. And he decided, I cannot start dating until I hit a certain goal in this area. Because that's what's necessary. If I'm going to be married, I have to take on responsibility seriously. And it means I can't sleep all day. I can't do that. And by setting a goal, what time I'm going to wake up? I'm going to wake up for Shacharis. Okay, what time Shacharis? It doesn't make a difference. As long as I'm going to Shacharis. So you want to pick the latest Shacharis? So pick the latest Shacharis. I'm going to Shacharis. And you know what? He did it. He did it. Over the span of a number of weeks, months, he wasn't 100%. You know, everybody has falls, but he did it. He was able to accomplish his goal and many of the other goals that he set for himself. And after a number of months, he said, okay, I did it. Now I'm ready to start dating. Now, what does that show you? It shows you, first of all, that he got to know himself. He got to see where his weaknesses were. He got to understand really what does it mean to be, in his eyes, of course, a responsible person. Because anybody who gets married has to be responsible. You're taking responsibility over somebody else's life. So you have to have responsibility over your own life too. It's much easier to have no responsibilities, to not have to worry about anybody else, and I just go through my own life and do my own thing, and wake up whenever I want to wake up, do whatever I want to do, eat whenever I want to eat, do anything, and on a whim I can jump here and jump there. Yeah, when a person gets married, he can't do all those things. He can't. And he decided for himself certain goals. This was one of them, and he did it. He did it before he started dating. That's a very, very important thing, that it's before you start dating. Because a person who comes along and changes his tune and says something like, I'll do it when I get married. I know that it's an important thing, and I know that I really want to do it, and when I get married, that's when I'm going to do it. That is not going to happen. It just doesn't. I remember a guy many years ago who wanted to quit smoking. And he decided, I'm going to do it for his Kala at the time. Let's say her name is Sarah. I'm going to do it for Sarah. I'm going to do it for Sarah. Yeah, 6 months after the Chasana, so I'm smoking just as much. Yeah? Well, now, why doesn't that work? Why isn't your Kala, your wife, a great motivation to change? It's a great motivation to change when there's an excitement, a newness, but ultimately it doesn't really go into yourself. You're taking some form of an external probe, somebody who does something you think is going to push you from the outside, but a person doesn't have enough of a push from the inside in order to change. There's a famous saying that marriage is not a hospital. Yeah? It's not. Marriage is not a hospital. Meaning, if you're sick, marriage is not going to help you. If you're sick, it's just going to make things worse. It's not going to be helpful. Bakasha. Marriage is not a hospital. If a person has an issue, a person has a problem, marriage, if anything, is just going to make things worse. Everybody has a certain expectation in marriage. That means girls have expectations in marriage too. And they expect that their husbands are going to be a certain way. Now, granted, something of the effect of, smoking, if I know that he's smoking beforehand, so then, is he going to be smoking afterwards too? Well, what if he tells her, I'm going to quit smoking for you? she's going to believe that. She will. Because he's my hero. He's my knight in shining armor. He's my chassan, and I believe everything that he's going to say. And when she says, especially, she hears it. She hears it. I'm going to do it for you. Wow, she really believes it. She really does. And 6 months down the road, when he's doing it, the same exact thing that he was doing before, well, that really hurts. Not just because he didn't stop, but because what happened to doing it for me?
But what about the 3 months between the engagement and the wedding? Can't that be the trial time?
It can be, but it's not usually a good idea because usually there are ups and downs. Usually and many times it's not 3 months. It's not 3 months at all. You know, many times it's much less than that. Much less. Yeah. Could be 6 weeks, 2 months. Could be much less. And that's really just not enough time, especially because the engagement time is so busy. There's so many things that are on both a chassan and kala's heads at that time that to put focus on real change and growth takes a lot of effort, and that's not something that can be done at that time. We're talking about getting ready. At that point, you have to be ready already. So it will hurt her a lot more if she knows, he promised her this, or maybe it didn't come out as a promise, but that's how she took it. I'm going to do this for you. I'm going to change for you. And then he doesn't, which is quite normal because there's nothing necessarily pushing him per se except for this one point. If you're not really dedicated to it, to this point specifically, and you're only doing it because I really want to make it nice for you, so then most of the time it's going to fall short. You will not do it, and you end up actually much worse off than before you started.
I don't agree with this at all.
It would make sense.
I disagree. I think that a person in life keeps growing and evolving and becoming a better version of themselves. And if they get married and everything in their life just deteriorates from there, then
that's not what I meant. Okay, so let's try to clarify.
If a person is smoking 1 cigarette a day and he says is the girl that he's going to marry says, I'm going to try to take that down to 1 a week and then hopefully down to nothing, then he's being honest with her. He knows that it's a problem. He's going to work on it. And if you're saying that it's the opposite, he'll smoke 1 a day because he'll be more in pressure, because he'll be like whatever, then maybe he shouldn't marry this girl. Maybe it's not the right time.
I think maybe you misunderstood it. Let's try to say this again. Yeah, a person who recognizes that they have a problem, and they recognize that this is something I really want to work on, I really want to fix. So pushing it off till after marriage is a bad idea. Is a very, very bad idea. If a person recognizes the problem, the best time to do it is right away. Now, we discussed last week about taking the time out to think about that. Think about, where am I holding? What are the things that I need to work on? Where am I going? What direction am I going in? Yeah? A person has to truly be motivated, but the best motivation comes from inside, knowing that I need to change. I need to be different. When a person uses a motivation, especially, and this is what I want to point out, there's a certain excitement that comes with being engaged. That excitement is something that's very fleeting. It goes away very, very quickly. Yeah? There's a certain feeling that many people call love. Probably the proper word is infatuation. Yeah? Love requires a lot of hard work, which most of the Western world doesn't understand. You know, to them, love basically means taking, fulfilling all my taivas, and that's why I love, right? The classic example I've given many times is that a person goes into a fish restaurant and he loves eating fish. So he's talking to him, do you love fish? He's like, I love fish. I love it. I love fish. Fish is unbelievable. And the guy is scarfing down the fish like crazy. And she said, well, if you really love fish, wouldn't you like give it a nice fish tank and like with really nice coral and the best fish food and the best, big, whatever. And he's like, looks at you kind of like you're strange. She's like, no, I love eating fish. I love eating fish. Says, oh, you don't love fish, you love yourself. You have to kill the fish in order for you to love yourself. And that's how most of the world looks at the word love. Love means fulfilling my own desires, right? So when a person approaches marriage, that is a crippling way of looking at marriage, which is maybe why there's so much divorce and the divorce rates are so high in the Western world, because that's how people look at it. And that's what happens. Because they take. Because it's all about me. By giving, yes. Now, it's a little bit more complicated than just that. Yes, that is true, which maybe we'll have a whole different shir about that, but not for now. I'm just trying to bring out the point about oneself and why it is that if a person thinks that I'm going to change after I get married, I know I have to make these changes. I know that's the person I want to be. I want to be that person, so do it now. A person says that I'm going to do it after I get married, good 95% chance that he won't do it at all. That's just the way it is.
So what's the goal? When is one considered ready to get married? Because one, like Yitzhak said before, one is always evolving. So when's the right time?
So I think that first of all, like we said last week, a person has to first of all understand where they're holding. You have to understand where you're going. What's my goals? Where do I want to be? And then a person has to say, okay, what can I do right now? I say that I want to be living in this community. Okay, that's great. And I want to be doing, being with this kihila, sending my kids. All these things only happen after you get married. So, but what do I do now? What do I do now? I prepare for that. How do I prepare for that? Well, what that kind of community, what are their value? Yeah, what is that kind of community value? Do they value a guy who goes to work 9 to 5 and comes to learn at night for an hour and a half? Is that what they value? Do they value a guy who sits and learns all day? Do they value a guy who's a big Baal Chesed? Maybe you have to think about that. Well, like if I want to be part of that community, where do I want to fit in that community? Also, a lot of it has to do with my own personal self. My own personal self, meaning what if I'm going to be a husband, I'm going to be a father, and I want my kids to look at me a certain way, so what do I have to do? What do I have to do for that? A lot of guys have said to me, I need to learn Gemara so that when I learn with my kids, I'll be able to learn with them. That's very important. It is. That's a big motivation. But you can't decide that, your kid's going into second, third grade. Well, I haven't learned Gemara my whole life. In another year or so, he's going to be starting to learn Gemara. I don't know anything about learning Gemara. How in the world am I going to do this? Right? That's not something that you can decide even a year or two beforehand. It's something a person needs to decide way before that. A person doesn't know how to read Hebrew. So then, it's going to be very hard for them to be able to learn with their children. That's something that a person has to decide, hey, I need to do this. But there's certain even more basic things, like we said, getting up for Shacharis. Another thing somebody told me was going to shul on Shabbos. Going to shul on Shabbos. Yeah, that's something else. There's certain basics that a person looks at themselves and they say, maybe it's based on their upbringing, maybe it's based on the people they've been around, that this is how I decide that I'm ready. If a person sees those goals, and a person sees, I need to do this and I need to do that, and they actually start working on it, and they start to see success over some span of time, not a week, not 2 weeks, let's say a minimum of 5-6 weeks, and they really starting to see growth, I think that's already a sign. It doesn't mean they should stop, and it doesn't mean you have to be a finished product, but it does mean I'm working on it, I'm seeing success. That's already good enough to say that goal is something that I'm working on, and not to stop working on it, but say that's good enough to ready to check it off the list of things that I need to do before I start dating. That's already good enough. Not to stop, of course not. But I've proven to myself that I can do this, and that shows real growth. Once you show real growth, that's a check. One last point is that I said that marriage is not a hospital. I saw a very nice line. You know what is a hospital? A yeshiva is a hospital. A yeshiva is a hospital. Why is a yeshiva a hospital? Because what does it mean that it's a hospital? Hospital is a place where people go when they're sick. I have a problem. I have a medical problem. I'm going to the hospital to try to heal my problem. Yeah? So marriage is not that. Marriage can't be that. Because whatever problem you have, it's just going to get worse, probably. What happens in marriage usually the first number of months are very exciting and everybody's on their best behavior. I don't want to mess anything up. My chassan teacher told me, do this, do that. I have to be. Usually that lasts for a number of months. After a little while, what happens to most normal people is I become a regular person again. Regular person means that, yeah, I'm comfortable over here. I'll do the same things that I did before. I'll do now. And that's what happens. All the same regular things that I always did, and even though I was always on my best behavior the last number of months. But now, it's just like, yeah, we're together. It's okay, fine. This is the same. This is my home. I don't mind, I threw my socks on the floor before. I was over them on the floor. Every day to think of it, to put my socks in the hamper, it was driving me crazy. Okay, you know what? Not a big deal. A few days piled up is not the end of the world, yeah? I'm just giving like a silly, somewhat example, but
slowly can become worse.
Right? It gets much
in
worse.
other areas in life.
Every
A lot
time
of areas.
you a little bit back, a little bit, and then
So
you
that-
just find yourself.
So that's why it's not a hospital.
And no clean clothes.
So what? You put on not clean clothes also.
But if the other
Personal
person-
hygiene somehow, goes to dip.
But if the other person's honest with you, you're honest with her, she's with you, and they say that doesn't work for me,
Okay.
then you'll go back to your best behavior.
Will it? Not, no.
Or you'll try a little more.
Or you'll get into a big fight, which is what happens to a lot of people, start getting into fights.
That's for sure.
Yeah.
So you just keep throwing your socks and she keeps ignoring it, or the opposite?
Well, we don't want to get to that point. A yeshiva is a hospital. Why is a yeshiva a hospital? Because if you use yeshiva, whichever yeshiva it is, it's a place where you can come and talk out whatever things you need to work out and work on it. And it's a place where you can have falls, have your readers and aliyahs, and people aren't judging you. And if you're working hard, slowly you can build it up. And there isn't necessarily a certain time span where it takes this amount of time, and if not, I'm going to throw you out of the house. Yeah, it doesn't work like that. There are a lot of people that are there to help you grow. When the dynamic between a husband and wife is very, very different. When a person is working on themselves, the best place to be is to be connected to a yeshiva. That's the best place, because there are people there that they're willing and happy to help you work on that. When it's marriage, a wife looks at a husband as a leader. That means he already has to be that leader, the leader of whatever direction you're going in, but you still have to be that leader. And it works the other way also. A man certainly has certain expectations of his wife, and what if she's not up to par on those things? What if she hasn't worked on them? What if she's, girls theoretically don't have to go to Shacharis in the morning, so what if she sleeps till 3 o'clock in the afternoon? And because of that, there's no food. The dishes are still in the sink from 3 days ago, and there's no food in the refrigerator. Yeah, and I have no clean clothing. And she just doesn't care, because you come back and she's on the phone, whatever, with whatever. Well, that's what I'm saying. It works the same way. It works both ways. It works both ways. Usually, it's in ve'agefen and in ve'agefen. Usually the two come together, meaning it's extremely. Hashem is mazabek zivugim. So Hashem knows these two people are the right two people to put together. If a person is a growing person and he's working very hard and he's seeing success, he doesn't have to worry that Hashem's gonna send him somebody who is not and is totally gonna drive him crazy, because she's not in that same place. Usually it works together very, very well, that the two sides meet in the right place, wherever they're holding. Anyway, the Maisa, that's the continuation from last week's shir, and now we're going to move on to the next part of the shir. I just, where we're holding exactly. I just don't want it to be too long. Okay. Okay. So we're gonna start on now. Why do we date the way we date? Why does a frum person date using whatever the shidduch system? Why do we do that? Now, there are certainly some very good things about the shidduch system, and there are certainly things in the shidduch system that are not very good. Yeah? and we taking the system as a whole, and we are trying our best in the system. But it's not kedai to go outside of the system. Why? Well, let's explain what happens. What's what's happening in the shidduch system
How
that's
long should a
making this?
person be in the system before he says the system isn't working
Let's
for me?
talk about what the system is first, and then we'll talk about what how somebody
The
shouldn't
definition of
change
insanity
things.
is
Yeah,
doing the same thing again and again, expecting different results.
it's true, but that's from a physics perspective. This is not physics. Yeah, this is not a hard science. Yeah? This is something that is much, much more dynamic. We're dealing with people. We're not dealing with, numbers or gravity. So let's explain what happens in the general world and explain what happens here. Okay? So let's begin by explaining what happens growing up. The relationship or lack of relationship between boys and girls when they are young and as they grow older. The relationship between a husband and wife is supposed to be a very exclusive relationship. It's supposed to be a very strong, the strongest relationship, human relationship that a person can have. And in order to create that strength, it has to be completely exclusive. Exclusive means that there is nobody else. I don't have a relationship. A man doesn't have a relationship with other women, and a woman doesn't have a relationship with other men. It has to be that way. Any relationship that a man has with another woman who is not his mother, grandmother, daughter, sister, yeah, he has a relationship with his neighbor. He has a relationship with his aunt. He has a relationship with his wife's sister. He has his ways with co-worker, yeah, banker, whoever it is, that will take away from the relationship with his wife. And it works the opposite as well. If a woman has a relationship with numerous other men, then that will also take away from the relationship that she has with her husband. That's just the mitzias. That's the way it is. So, growing up in many communities, the focus is on keeping away boys from girls because they're going to create relationships that ultimately will harm themselves in the future. Besides all the potential isurim, which we don't necessarily even have to get to, which certainly are important, but not for right now. Just this point should be enough to say, hey, don't I want to have a strong relationship with my wife? Many people will say, why can't I have fun now and also be able to have a good relationship with my wife later? And the answer to that question is because you can't. It just doesn't work that way. You will hurt the relationship with your wife. There's no question about it. Whether or not you will admit to it now or whether or not, I don't know, maybe it's not true. Okay. You know what's insanity? I'll tell you what insanity is. I'll give you a marshal. Yeah? You have a guy who's standing on a crossroads. There are two roads. And somebody comes to that road and he wants to go right. But the guy's saying there, you shouldn't go right over here because at the end there's a cliff. You could fall off the cliff. And even to get there, right now it looks very smooth, but it's going to be really, really, really bumpy ride. The other way is longer. It looks a little bit tough in the beginning, but by the end it'll be much better way. It happens to be the first way is a better view. I wanted to see the view. I enjoyed that. So the guy's standing there. So the car comes and he gets to this crossroad. He tells him this. I don't care what you have to say. I don't care. I'm going my way. And he does. And he almost falls off the cliff. Yeah. He actually sees some cars down there that actually fall off the cliff. Yeah. And he
doesn't get to his destination.
And he doesn't he barely makes it back. Yeah. And he said, why didn't you listen to me? Why didn't you listen to me? I wanted to do it by myself. So you have to. Okay. So now that second guy comes, and now he's standing there on the crossroad, and a new car comes. And he tells him the exact same thing. Don't do that. You're just gonna end up getting hurt. And this new car that comes says exactly the same thing. Well, I don't care what you have to say. I'm just gonna do it anyway. That's what insanity is. Nobody's learning from anybody else's mistakes. Nobody's seeing that, hey, I did the exact same thing as you, and I almost died doing it. Don't do it. I don't care what you have to say. I'm just gonna do it on my own. But that's what happens.
Maybe he doesn't trust him. Maybe he doesn't know who he is.
Okay.
Maybe he doesn't. Whatever.
Okay, that's but you know what? If somebody's there trying to help you, at the end of the day, it's much better to learn from somebody else's mistakes than your own mistakes. So if somebody decides, I'm going to have fun now and later, and then he realizes that, unfortunately, many times it's too late at that point, and he tries to warn the next guy, well, the next guy's not going to listen to him either, and he's going to fall into the same problem.
Should have found a guide before he went on the road.
Yeah, that's right. That's the best thing to do. But you have to trust the guide. You have to really know that the guy knows what he's talking about. So what happens is that if there are relationships between boys and girls growing up, so then you've already created a certain amount of relationship that's going to be taking away from ultimately whoever's going to be your wife. You're not going to have that necessarily that deep relationship unless you're willing to work even extra hard. And that's really much, much harder. It's much, much harder to be able to fix something that you broke. If it were never broken in the first place, then you don't have to worry about it. It's not impossible. It's not impossible. But it takes a lot more work. A lot more work. So coming back to what we were saying, growing up in a world where boys and girls are separate makes your future much easier. It makes your potential for a great relationship with your wife much easier. Like I said, it's not impossible. It's not impossible to still do it, to still get to a point where a person can have a very strong relationship with their wife. It's not impossible, but it's harder. The person has to be willing to put in much more effort. Therefore, when a person comes to shidduchim, when it comes to starting to date, trying to find a wife, what we're trying to do is we're trying to focus on what will make a good wife. I'm not looking into having a relationship with many girls. That's not my point. And I'm not just looking to have fun. Just as much as the same reason it wasn't supposed to be when I was younger, it's the same reason now. I'm not looking just to have a good time. I'm looking to be able to have the best relationship of my life. That's what I'm looking for. So how do I do that? What's the focus? Number one, what the focus is knowing that this person that I'm going to be with is on the same page as me. We have similar goals. We are looking towards the same place. That is the most important thing. Now, there's a very big roadblock for that. That big roadblock is called attraction. It's called a pretty face. It's called a very nice figure. That is a big roadblock. The reason is not because that's not important. It is important. It's very important. But it can't be the most important. What happens in the secular world is that is the number one thing. That is the most important thing. And it's so great that it's the most important thing that it beats everything. Everything becomes almost like zero. Everything is almost zero. It is so big, it is so important that everything else becomes meaningless. And what happens is a relationship is created. As long as, her personality isn't completely horrible, somehow they can make up some kind of relationship. And they can use each other. And they come to a point where they have this relationship and really they're not matim for each other b'chalal. In the 2022 version of that, she's a Democrat and he's a Republican. It's like, his Pasha's like, There's nothing to talk about over here. Like no Shacharis. But it only came out after they've gotten to know each other over 3 months. Yeah, they never actually talked about anything that was important to them, right? So, but like, well, now what? Now what are we supposed to do? There's no way we can't live with each other. We can't. Well, you're gonna want to raise your kids this way, and I'm gonna want to raise my kids that way. You're gonna want to do this, and I'm gonna want to do that. Like we're just gonna be fighting all the time. Nothing is gonna work over here. And why did this happen? Because a person got blinded. He was blinded from the very beginning. And that pretty face, just like, ooh, that took over. And that's what happens. That's what happens in the secular world. That's what happens when we're not doing things in the proper order of the way they should be done. When a person has their own goals, and I know where I'm going, now I have to look for that person who has similar goals. That's the number one thing. Who is going to be able to relate to me in this way that we can work together to create a home, to create a relationship where we are together. I can't get distracted from that. That is the most important thing. And that's why, before a person goes out even, people send some form of shidduch resume. Now, back not so long ago, it wasn't so formal like that. It wasn't you have to write the name and this and that. Rather, it was the same type of thing, but without it. I have a friend who is looking to do this and this, and I know him for many years, and I think it would be, from what I understand about your daughter, sister, cousin, whatever, it would be matim because I heard similar things. And so nowadays it's a resume. The resume is very unclear because there's not a lot of information on it. The only really main information that a person gets on it is technical details, which is important. Important to have technical details, like where the parents are, parents married, the siblings, what are they doing? Okay, Seder, it gives you a very, very shallow picture, and then there's supposed to be a little paragraph about who you are and where you're going, what you want, and the type of girl that you're looking for. That's like very, very, very shallow, but something. It's a starting point. And then there are references on it. The references should be people who can know you, can talk about you, and tell the person that, hey, this is who this person is. This person is going in this direction. This is what they're looking for. This is what they want. And therefore, you have to really know who you're putting on your list. You have to know what the names, because the person who's coming to check out who you are, to know if this is matim, is going to be asking the questions that they feel is relevant for them. If it's not relevant, so then there's a mismatch over here. This shidduch should never have started in the first place. Okay, and that's really what you're doing with this, to see if this is something that is matim or not matim. Which is why you're supposed to be calling the references. You're supposed to be calling to find out if this matim. In the most extreme situation, in the Hasidic world, this is everything. Everything.
Well,
You need to
references.
know every single detail to make sure that this is mamish matim. And then they meet one time or two times. In a extreme situations, 3 times. Yeah. And that's it. They get married.
A year later.
They get married because attraction is as important as it is. Attraction, many times, you can find after just seeing the person 1 time or 2 times. That should be good enough.
3 new
Yeah,
too.
that's it.
I wonder what happens in a Hasidic family after a date. That the guy comes home and he tells his parents, I don't want to continue going out with her because I don't find her attractive.
I don't know,
They're
but
like, did you
really,
read the resume?
really, that should be.
Seems perfect on paper, but
Really, that should be a X. You should nix the shidduch for sure. Should be that way. Usually, even that though is checked out beforehand. Why? How? Because the mother of the boy will probably want to meet with the girl first, and the
I didn't know that.
and the father of the girl will meet with the boy, so that they already see the face, they already know that who they're talking about, and they can get a feeling of, is this somebody that my daughter will find attractive? Is this somebody my son will find attractive? And if they really think not, so then they'll probably nix it already before that point. But yes, it's possible that you'll get to that point. And if people are doing things the right way and they're not pressuring in a place that they should not be pressuring, so then that should be an X. That should be okay. Then you're not marrying the person. You cannot marry somebody that you don't find attractive. Nobody can. Which is why there's a chiyuv. There's a chiyuv for a man to see the girl that he's marrying before he marries her. It is also to get married to somebody who you've never seen before. Yeah. So that is mafurish Gemara in Kiddushin. Okay, but that is really not fair. I'm sure that's not true. I don't know anybody like that. Even in the Hasidic world, they don't do that. They do meet beforehand so that you can see.
Oh, but you need to confirm.
Okay, confirm that it's
That's what it is, no?
the Maisa, it is very important. But I think we already hit our ending point for today. So we're going to continue with this as Hashem next week.